Hey guys, welcome to a rare Warilaski tutorial. We don't do these enough. A lot of times we put them on the back burner because we just want to jump on to the next project, but we figure that we're gonna try and pull a few more of these through for you guys here. This one right here is the effect in our Pokemon Brawl video, where I just decked Mike and we've got him floating across the air, horizontal, and then you just come in with a nice little elbow strike. So it's almost like time has frozen and we're seeing this moment, but then there's the surprise that, oh, this guy can still move because he's super fast or something. And it's definitely inspired by a very anime look. And that's what we were going for. So you'll see elements like the crazy flares that just don't really make sense, and the streaks coming across, just, you know, a lot of it, and it's very bright, very kind of anime sort of feel. So I'm going to break this down here for you guys. One of the things we did on this video was we didn't lock down any cameras. Normally we will lock down cameras. That's sort of, I don't know, it usually saves a step, or at least up till now we've locked down cameras. But one of the things that we found is that kind of lends towards a less dynamic kind of style. And sometimes it's like, nah, instead of showing this thing all the way through, we're going to cut to this, then cut to this, instead of moving the camera to that. That way both effects can be locked down and it's going to be easier to pull off. But it's much more interesting to see, and it's not really actually that hard to track. Especially like this is not even really camera movement. What we're doing here is preserving the natural camera shake that you could see. And by preserving that, we're kind of lending a little more realism to it, because if you lock down a shot, you usually reintroduce a little bit of camera shake, and that just never quite looks as real as an actual camera moving around. So we had this first shot, and we just basically pulled it off by having me fake the slow motion, and we shoot all our fight scenes at 60 frames per second. That allows us to do speed ramps that aren't noticeable. But it also allows us to slow down footage if we have to make something seem like it's more still. So we have me, and I go up and into the elbow strike like Mike was there. Now, it was a very sunny day, so a few of the challenges we had with this shot was dealing with shadows and dealing with Mike intersecting me here, and that my shadow was going to have to go on top of him. Now you're going to see we didn't really do that in the end, and you're going to see why. So we combine that. That's at the very bottom. We throw in this freeze frame that we had of Mike. What we did was we brought out our crash pad, and we just had Mike jump out a few times and land on it as horizontal as we could get him. Now that's really hard to do because these aren't legit crash pads. These are like exercise mats that we picked up for pretty cheap. And, you know, scrubbed through the footage and just found a spot where Mike was pretty horizontal. The actual clip, this was about the best part of it, but he just kind of was standing there, just jumped, and so we found the part that looked the most like his head was turning away, like he'd been punched. So we come in here, so we have that here, just we freeze frame it, so we right click the footage and we go to time, and then freeze frame, and it'll freeze frame that in that comp. You bring that in here, and what that allows us to do is cut Mike out and throw a little bit of puppet tool animation on Mike. So I use Roto Brush because it's quick and dirty, and just threw puppet tool on and found a few key anchors in his body, and just slowly you'll see there's a little bit of movement with his hand up here and with his legs almost kind of like they're bending, but then you'll see a lot of movement once he gets elbowed and knocked down to the ground. And if you see that by itself, it's a fairly convincing effect, but you know, his clothes aren't moving exactly the way that you would expect. So what I actually did was I used the puppet tool to get Mike into a position that was more horizontal than he really was. The second problem we had really was dealing with Mike's shadow on top of that. Now the shadow, we ended up taking the actual shadow from the shot and masking it out, kind of getting all the little elements of it because that was the pose that he was in. And then we brought it back in here and threw the roughen edges effect on top of it. Now roughen edges, we just kind of fine-tuned it to where we got kind of a spiky look out of it. So it looked like it was on top of some grass. And it's really hard to notice the difference between Mike's shadow, which wasn't really there, and my shadow, which was, because of the roughened edges. If we take that off, we notice that Mike's shadow looks like it's on a nice smooth surface, and mine doesn't. So roughened edges just adds that extra little bit of polish. So if you need to do shots that are supposed to be with shadows on grass, roughened edges, go to spiky. Here we have border of 8 and sharpness 1, fractal influence 1, scale 28. And it's a really good technique to replicate the look of grass, how it'll roughen and break up a shadow. The other thing we had to do here was we had me in front of Mike. And so we rotoed. I actually did 2 rotos for myself. I just rotoed the parts that we mostly needed to be in front of Mike, and then we had the leg that just needed to be in front of the shadow. And again, we used roto brush for this. Roto brush is awesome. And, you know, since we were shooting at a park where it's mostly green, it's essentially almost green screen it. It's really nice. I mean, we almost could have gotten away with just doing a key on the green color of the grass, but a lot of my body intersected with other areas that weren't exactly going to work. So roto brush, pulled that off. So now I'm in front of Mike. Now you see my shadow is intersecting with Mike's shadow down here on the ground, but it's not intersecting with him. Now that is just not an effect that it would be worth putting the time in to pull off, because this is such a quick shot, and enough of the other elements, if the other elements are convincing enough, it's not that important to, you know, kill yourself trying to pull off one little thing. I don't know that anyone said anything about, oh, the shadow wasn't there yet. Obviously people realize this is something that's impossible to do. And so at least from the first position, you know, you could see maybe the shadow's not intersecting, but by the end it should be. But it doesn't matter because we have convincing layers. On top of all that, what we actually decided to do was just throw so much stuff at the viewer that, I mean, it was just overwhelming. So, you know, we have lots of flares going on here. And for all the attacks that my character was doing, we tried to have a warm kind of feel to them. And for all of the attacks that Mike's character was doing, we tried to have a cool feel to them. So there was a fire and ice kind of back and forth thing going on. And so these flares, they're all tinted. We're using optical flares here. They're all a couple of different flares that are tinted just a warm color. And it's not just one flare. It's multiple flares because we wanted things coming from angles that just, you know, you couldn't get out of just one light source. So we're kind of acting like there's multiple light sources here. Here is, and then we have the rainbows going on. Now these rainbow flares are almost the main effect of the whole thing because it's what you kind of notice the most. And they're kind of wrapped around each other and they just unwrap. And so we just animated, and I believe the light source is, yeah, it's right here on this shot, but we actually took out the center of the flare and we just had the kind of rings on the fringe coming out. We animated that down to the left. Now there's not a light source doing that in the shot, but it doesn't matter because it works. It just helps it feel brighter. And it's screened on, so it's really not too intense of an effect. And you know, it just kind of makes it feel like this is just really intense here, especially since we're going for the anime look. So that's something to throw in. If you guys are doing any kind of anime style fight scenes, this works really well. Layering different flares that you wouldn't really get in real life, but flares that mean something that are derived from your action. So right here we have a punch that's happening, and even though this flare was coming from the bottom left-hand corner, the center point of those flares, they all kind of converge on where the action is happening, and they open up to reveal it a little more. So they're kind of like expanding out from that point. So that's something to keep in mind. We also threw in your typical anime kind of motion streaks. We just made a simple particle in particular, just a line, and we just shot them out. Looks like we positioned it so they were coming out at an angle, since in the shot there's a little bit of an angle going on. If you would imagine that I'm oriented more this way and Mike's flying more this way, so there's a slight angle to it. And we just kind of threw that on, just screened it on, and it was an extra layer of just stuff happening and intensity and things flying by. Again, that would not work in anything that wasn't just supposed to be anime, but it gave another layer. And all of these things are adding up to kind of, you can't notice them all in one go. And so it's sort of overwhelming to the eye, so to speak, and it keeps you from noticing certain other things like my shadow not intersecting with Mike's body there. And then towards the end, Mike gets hit down into the ground, and we threw a dirt charge in right here, so that, you know, it's sort of like an impact. And it's not like, it's not very noticeable, but because there's such a big glow, because we were doing a wipe, we were going from a, you know, blanking out the screen to blanking out the screen, so that we could cut. And yeah, it's not super noticeable, but it's something you would expect to see, some kind of visual indication that something's making contact with the ground there. And then the last thing that we did, which is an effect that I really recommend, is this chromatic aberration here. Where was it? I'm gonna have to track down where we got that from and throw it in the description. But this is a free script that will run some chromatic aberration on your footage. Now, chromatic aberration is sort of where you'll see color fringing. For example, it's a really dramatic effect here. You can see that towards the edges, you know, this pole is split into like a warm tone and a cool tone pole. And that's sort of the chromatic aberration effect that we're looking for. Again, it just feels bright, and it feels like almost like there's this distortion through reality that we're looking through, and it sells the effect that time is not the same as it was before we entered this shot. It also covers up, you know, again, any kind of mistakes with the roto or anything that was sort of rough, or the shadows. And by the time you have the chromatic aberration in there, it's almost like an atmospheric ripple. And that just really serves to just be the final polish on the shot that makes it all work. So if you guys were wanting to go out and replicate a shot like this, first off, I would recommend, if you can, shoot in the shade or shoot on a cloudy day. Fortunate for us, the look of this video is supposed to be very bright, and so you can see the shadows are going away. We're shooting with the sun as a nice big key light there, and it just helped. And again, this effect is all, you know, brightness, and that was sort of the theme of the whole look here. But you have to deal with really, really hard shadows. Otherwise, you know, with somebody jumping that high in the air, there wouldn't be much of a shadow below them if it was a cloudy day. So if you can avoid it, try not to shoot this kind of effect on a day where there's going to be really obvious harsh shadows. We'll just kind of show you. You can see that ripple and distortion that's going on from that chromatic aberration. There's some more distortion going on because of an extra layer that we threw in. And so anyways, the end effect is just one of just a lot of things going on. There's focus to the shot and there's direction. You know where you're supposed to look, but there's enough other things going on that you could sit here and you could kind of, the eye can kind of pick up on a few different details each time you watch it. And each one is subtle. It's not calling attention to itself. So optical flares is awesome for that sort of thing. That is it for this tutorial here, guys. If you want to see more tutorials on specific shots that we've done, we can do more detailed breakdowns for you if you would like to see those. We're going to be doing more tutorials in the future. So anything that you guys want to see is fair game. Any effect you've seen in a video that we've done in the past, we still have all our project files. We don't delete anything. So if you want to see it broken down, you want to see how we did it, then just let us know in the comments below. All right, well, we'll see you guys next time.